Hello there, and welcome to Community Forum. My name is Roy Cohen, and I'll be hosting this show. And I think that by the time you watch the entire hour, you will find that there's a lot of interesting things that we have to do to start to clean up our water supply, etc. We have as our guest today Kerry Snyder. She is the Advocacy Director of the Neponset River Watershed Association, which I've never heard of, but since we all received this particular brochure throughout the town, I started to learn about things that are going on, things that we take for granted and things we do without thinking that we should no longer do because we are harming the water supply. So I want to welcome Kerry.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you with us. Can you give us, to start off, a little resume on the Watershed Association?
Sure. So the Watershed Association is it's a grassroots, member-supported conservation group. Since 1967, we've been working to protect and clean up the Neponset River. And all the tributaries that feed into the Neponset, all the brooks and streams, as well as the land around it, because the land also has water that drains into the Neponset. And actually that brings me to our name. A watershed is essentially all of the areas that drain into a particular surface water body. Mm-hmm. So the Neponset River Watershed covers 14 towns. It's 30 miles long from Foxborough to Dorchester, and about 330,000 people live in the watershed. So they're living on land that drains ultimately into the Neponset and up through Dorchester Bay.
Where does the Neponset, where does it drain into?
So the end point is Dorchester Bay. So right up by the gas tanks. Yeah. That's where it ends up. It starts in the Foxborough area, actually right near Gillette Stadium. Mm-hmm. So fortunately, when they actually, an interesting story, when they built Gillette, they daylighted the Neponset. So the Neponset had been running through a culvert underneath the old stadium, and the crafts fortunately sort of brought it to the surface and took it out of the culvert, and so now you can see it. It's very small down there, but you can still see it.
It starts there, though.
Yeah.
I remember when, well, it must be 15 or 20 years ago, that Dorchester Bay was probably the dirtiest water in the country.
The Boston Harbor and Dorchester Bay have come a long way. There's still some residual pollution there, and we're always working to sort of make sure that, you know, development and redevelopment around the estuary, which is where the river and the salt water meet, mm-hmm. That anything that's going on there is sort of cleaning up that water.
The biggest problem was when there was a rainstorm.
Yes.
And all that dirt from the highway went into the culverts.
Yes.
And then they came out into the bay. Yep. Further polluting it.
Yep.
But they've I guess they've cleaned up quite a bit of it.
They have. The Neponset itself has come a long way. I think what you're talking about is they used to have sort of these combined pipes with wastewater, sewer water, and stormwater, and they'd both come out. So that rainwater that you're talking about is what we refer to as stormwater, mm-hmm. And while the Neponset was historically an industrial river, and it does have some residual pollution from that industry, most of the pollution that's happening right now is from that stormwater runoff, that rainwater that picks stuff up and flows into the river.
Nothing like what's going on down south. I mean, they have flooding and they have areas that never had the water that are now inundated with water and alligators.
Yes, and no sharks.
And snakes.
Yeah.
No sharks, no, it's not deep enough.
Right, so we do have some of the oldest stormwater infrastructure because the Northeast was settled early. In early years in the country, we do have some of the oldest infrastructure. So I think cities and towns are constantly trying to update that, but mm-hmm. It's an expensive process.
What towns are currently involved in your organization?
So like I said, we cover 14 towns. Let's see if I can remember them all. So Foxborough, Medfield, Stoughton, Sharon, Canton, Norwood, Dedham, Westwood,
and so on.
Boston, Quincy, Milton.
Boston also?
Yeah. Dorchester, and Hyde Park, Mattapan. So the Neponset really sort of winds.
And all these
winds
communities
through.
have representatives that meet occasionally to talk about what's going on and what improvements can be made?
Yeah, through the Neponset Stormwater Partnership, we actually are actively engaged with staff from 10 of our towns.
Mm-hmm.
And we meet at least quarterly, and the idea is to share some ideas and learn from each other what has worked, what hasn't worked. And it's been a great organization. The other thing is we can help them do some things that are that they all have to do in common. For example, we do a lot of outreach and education. Our outreach and education director reaches 1,500 students every year. She goes into classrooms and talks to fifth graders about water conservation and stormwater pollution. And we do that through this partnership.
What do you mean by water conservation? I mean, I know Stoughton has been very active in that area over the years.
Mm-hmm.
They used to pass out water dams. What do you call them? I'm having a blank spot. Also, fixtures that you screwed into your
the faucets,
water-saving devices.
Yep.
That's what it was, and they passed them out. And it was a pretty successful program, all designed to have us use less water.
Mm-hmm. So for many of our towns, about half of everybody who lives in the watershed gets their water from the watershed. So they're getting it through wells and pulling it up from the groundwater. When we have a year like we did in 2016, where we're in severe drought, you want to make sure that you're not pulling up too much from the groundwater. So we have water efficient faucets and fixtures that you can use. Every town has sort of a drought management where when there isn't enough water, they restrict your use of sprinklers on your lawn.
Mm-hmm.
It's annoying to a lot of people. You like your green lawn and not a brown lawn, but it's really important that those non-essential uses get cut back.
We had an active program going on many years ago. As a matter of fact, at the time I was serving on the Board of Selectmen, and we instituted watering policies, like you could water every other day, like Monday, Wednesday, and Friday.
Right.
And the in-between days would give the aquifers a chance to recharge. And that seemed to work out pretty well. And we also had times that you could water. And most people who really wanted the green lawns were able to do it.
Yeah.
There were a few cheaters along the way, and they, unfortunately for them, they got nabbed. But we were very interested in water conservation at the time, and to this day we're still, even this year, which was for a while pretty bad, we haven't been told to conserve the water. So we're pretty lucky in that way. So basically, the way the water will go down to the aquifer, it's got a screen through dirt and stone and all that kind of things that helps to clean it up before it gets into the aquifer.
Exactly.
So we can count on the water being pretty good.
Yes, once it filters through, the soil is really good at filtering out, excess nutrients and bacteria, all of that.
Yes, Stoughton has mostly well water.
Yes.
I think there's 6 or 7 active wells that we have.
Yep.
And occasionally they run into a problem and they shut one down and straighten out the problem and then turn it back on again.
That sounds right.
Stoughton's been pretty active about that. The stormwater, the placard that you mailed out, it's kind of interesting. It says storm drains are not trash cans.
That's right. So,
I mean, who would use a storm drain as a trash?
Oh, you'd be surprised.
I mean, so if just let everything go down there, figuring that's all you had to do.
Right. Well, a lot of people don't even notice the storm drains. So I'll back up a minute.
They don't notice it until they clog up.
Right, and then it floods.
Yeah.
But just to back up a little bit,
there's a diagram that everybody.
Oh,
can
there
see.
we go. Yes. So land in its natural state is soil, right? So when it rains or snows, all the water sort of seeps through the soil, gets clean, and recharges the groundwater.
Unless it's frozen.
Unless it's well, snow melt.
Okay.
But as we've developed our neighborhoods, we're putting down pavement and other materials that block the water from getting into the ground.
Right.
So we've got roofs that the rain runs off of. We've got our driveways. Even our lawns are pretty compacted, so they're not as permeable as
Really?
as land that hasn't been developed. Sure, because you've developed it. You've run equipment over it to build the house, for example, and you use it. A lot of people are on your lawn. So even that isn't quite as permeable as virgin land, for example. So because of this, and because we're not going to stop development anytime soon, we've developed ways to manage this rainwater. Otherwise, it would pool and flood our homes, our businesses, and it would have nowhere to go.
Mm-hmm.
So that diagram that we just saw shows the stormwater management system, a typical stormwater management system, where the rain falls on the roofs, it runs down driveways, runs down your lawn into a storm drain, which people may have seen right at the curb. It looks like that. And the water goes into the storm drain and out through a pipe to the nearest water body. But it doesn't treat the water before it gets to the water body. You might have a catch basin underneath. See, this is an outfall, which shows you this is exactly where the rainwater comes. This particular outfall is in Hyde Park. It's during a rain event, and the water is going right through. So a catch basin underneath a storm drain will allow some of the solids, leaves, litter, to sink to the bottom, and so the water that goes through the pipes is a little cleaner, but it's not doing anything for any of the chemicals and bacteria that might be in there, dissolved in there.
When you see a truck, DPW truck,
Mm-hmm.
coming around the scoop to go into the manhole,
Yep.
and they put all that stuff in the truck, that's all from the bottom.
Yes. Yeah, so they're scooping it out so that more stuff can collect in there. If they didn't scoop it out, it would just get clogged, and you'd end up with flooding because the water would have
Correct.
nowhere to go. So if you live near a storm drain, you want to make sure you clear it if you see it covered in leaves.
Especially, well, they've had some problems in areas that have flooded with the rain because the catch basins themselves were clogged up with leaves
Mm-hmm.
or stuff that shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
Interesting. I'm interested in the separation that takes place. It's interesting. I just thought the storm drains were storm drains for everything. I didn't realize they really serve an active purpose.
Yes, they've been designed to do something, but they're really not equivalent to treating the water. So that's why there are, it's a very simple structure. So there are all sorts of things that we should be doing on a daily basis to make sure that the water that ends up in there is as clean as possible.
All right. Do the people who are developing properties, do they consult with you about how much land they should leave untouched or not cover up with asphalt? In other words, I'm thinking of the Taj Estates that's in Stoughton. I don't know if you're familiar with where it is.
I'm not exactly, but
well,
yeah.
It's a huge complex that they're building. And prior to the building taking place, that whole land was dirt.
Okay.
And now a lot of it is pavement. So are they told that they must leave a certain percentage of virgin land untouched by pavement?
So that would be governed by Stoughton's zoning bylaws and stormwater management bylaws. So every town has their own set of rules and guidelines to make sure that we're not making the stormwater problem worse. And so the towns work with the developer, and it's all part of the planning process. So the developer has to go before the planning board. If they are close to the river or wetlands, they'll have to also go before the Conservation Commission. And through that process, hopefully come up with a plan that is both advantageous for the developer, but also good for the town and water quality as well. So developers don't necessarily consult with us, but we do get involved in the process, and we will actively reach out when we know of a development project to sort of try to make sure that their stormwater management system is the best it can be.
Hopefully Stoughton is doing that with the new library. They just developed a whole big parking lot, which used to be a house in dirt. Now it's a parking lot, so that water has to be collected at, hopefully in a convenient location.
Yes, and there are lots of things that that we can do around big parking lots and things like that. We actually worked with Stoughton recently on a project at the Gibbons School, through which we built 4 rain gardens, which are, that's sort of a generic term to refer to stormwater structures that collect water and filter it before it actually goes into the nearby water body. So Gibbons School, obviously has a parking lot and lots of paved surfaces, and now there's this beautiful rain garden right in the front that is not just beautiful. You see a picture here. This is before it really grew in, but it's designed so that the water from the parking lot goes over those rocks, which we call riprap. Those rocks collects all the solids, and then the water goes into the basin, and the plants in there are very, very hardy. They'll take up any excess nutrients that are in there, and the water can percolate through the soil and then out to the nearby brook.
The plants are happy.
The plants are very happy, yes.
Interesting.
It also serves as a great learning tool. So the students are going out there and they're learning about stormwater, they're learning about these stormwater management techniques. We helped Stoughton by developing that sign there, so it teaches them about it, and it was great. We helped the town also get grant money, so the town didn't have to pay for the whole thing. There was some state money that could be used. So it was a really great partnership with Craig Horsfall and Mark Tisdale, who really spearheaded the program. And I think it's a really good example of how we can work with towns to help them solve a problem. Yeah.
What about all these towns that are flooding? I mean, around here. Never mind down south. Down south, it's because they've received a tremendous amount of rainwater from the hurricane.
Yep.
But up here, there are some areas that regularly flood. What can be done about that, or what's the problem there?
So there are probably a lot of problems. We are seeing more big storms through climate change. We're also, we have built a lot. A lot of places around here are really fully developed, and there's very little undeveloped land. So that water has to go somewhere. So one of the solutions is, as we're redeveloping different properties, we can institute some green infrastructure, some structures that sort of are more natural and can naturally absorb some of that water and get rid of it.
Rainwater has gone from being a benefit to a nuisance, and that happens as we develop more and more land. That's a comment from your notes. No one wants their house to be flooded, or their business.
They don't.
So
that's why we have these stormwater structures.
Management system.
Yeah. We want to take that water from the pavement and we want to get it to where it needs to go. But we also want that water to be clean. I think I said earlier, one of the major sources of pollution in the Neponset today is the pollutants that come through stormwater. And there are things that we can do to minimize that. So for example, washing your car. A lot of people like to wash their cars in their driveways, but then all of that detergent is now being flushed into the street, down the driveway, and into the storm drain.
So you got to drive your car around to your nice manicured lawn and wash your car there?
Most commercial car washes will actually reclaim the water and recycle it.
How do you know that? They should. Can we say they should?
They should, yes, and many of them do. It works out for them because they're not paying for as much water because they're recycling water that is already used. I think in Stoughton,
when they were allowed to build that car wash on Washington Street, they were told that either they volunteered or they were told that they had to recycle the water. There are other car washes in Canton, Brockton. I wonder what they're doing.
Yeah, I don't know about any specific car washes, but I do know generally it's better to take your car to a commercial car wash.
You know, a couple of years ago we had a tremendous amount of snow. So much so that they ran out of places to put the snow. I'm talking the city of Boston.
Yeah, I remember.
and they were told, although you would think that they could just take the snow and dump it into the harbor, that's a no-no because of the pollution. And I never realized how much pollutants there were until the snow farms that they created melted.
Yeah.
And what was left was an ugly mess.
Yes.
And so that's why even in the streets you have to find a way to take the water and do something good with it.
You've got to do something with it.
There are places like the airport that melt the water.
Yes,
they have these huge melters.
I think I've seen that. Yeah,
they use on the runway to get rid of the snow there. I'm sure they must have. Well, they wouldn't have too much of a problem with pollution there because they're cleaning an area that's clean.
The runways and stuff.
Yeah.
Well, you're going to have some petroleum products that are that have leaked on there and other things. So I'm not sure I would call it clean from a water perspective, but certainly they should be collecting that water and treating it.
Okay, let's go a little bit into the polluted runoff.
Yeah.
You were talking about car washes.
Yes.
There are other things that you should be aware of when you're maintaining your own property.
Yes. First, don't dump anything down the storm drain. I have seen myself people. Yeah, it's not a trash can. I've seen people, change their own oil in their driveway and then dump the old oil in the catch basin.
What should they do?
Don't recycle it. Take it somewhere that will recycle it.
Your material said to take it back to where you bought your oil.
Yes, they will. They'll dispose of it properly. But just don't dump anything down there. The other thing is fertilizing. So we all want our nice lawns, we're watering it, we're fertilizing it, but make sure that fertilizer stays on your lawn. As soon as it gets on your driveway or the sidewalk next to you, that's going to then wash down into the storm drain. During the next rainfall, it's going to get into the local water body and it's going to feed plants that we don't necessarily want to feed. So if you've ever heard of an algae bloom, it's when algae gets a hold of these fertilizer products and they just grow. And they can be toxic. So if you have an algae bloom, now you can't fish in that water, or you can't swim in that water. So you just want to make sure that it stays on your lawn. Sweep it back onto your lawn and choose products that have slow releasing nitrogen and no phosphorus, and that will all help.
Maybe that would be a good way to get rid of the sharks.
Yeah.
Is red tide caused from?
It is, yes.
I was in Newport recently, and I saw at the beach this huge, dirty-looking water.
Yeah.
And I was told that's red tide.
I was reading recently about, I think they've been having a real problem with red tide in Florida as well, and they were tying it directly to the phosphorus, the nutrients that we keep putting into our water bodies.
So the snow melt runoff, you just have to be careful of what you're doing. You can't wash your car in the driveway.
Right. You want to be careful of any water that's flowing down your pavement and not filtering in through soil. Which brings me to another one. Pick up after your pets and dispose of the waste properly.
Oh, no, you're mean.
You've got to pick up after your pets.
The dog poop.
Yes, dog poop.
As the water runs off lawns, which are usually more compact than natural soil, roofs driveways, sidewalks, and roads. It picks up everything in its path.
Yes.
That includes litter, fertilizer, oil, and other petroleum products, chemicals from washing your car, road salt, dog poop, and other hazardous materials.
Yes.
So you gotta start being conscientious about these things.
Yes, it's not just nice for for your neighbors, but that dog waste that you're not picking up is a source of bacteria, and that's going to harm the fish. That's going to make the water unswimmable, and we have a real problem with bacteria pollution in the Neponset. So.
And you can't go walking around your lawn in bare feet.
Right, you probably shouldn't do that.
What about the there's a influx of these Canada geese?
Yes, that is also a source of pollution.
Is there anything being done to urge them to go eat and poop someplace else?
I think some wildlife management professionals have been working on that, but I don't know how you get rid of
There's
so
hundreds
many
of them.
geese. I don't know where they've come from, why we have so many, or what we do about that. Because you're right, they are everywhere.
What I feel bad about is when they're on fields that the kids play in.
Yep.
When it's time for sports, they got to be stepping in it all over the place.
Yeah.
And those birds make some pretty big poops.
Yes. You want to shower when you get home.
Yeah, it's disgusting. Okay, so let me see. We want to decrease the use of chemicals outside.
Yes. So that's where the fertilizers come in. Use as little salt as possible. Look, we all need to use salt in the winter to make sure we don't kill ourselves on the ice, but use it sparingly.
Okay, there are areas on the highway where it says caution, reduce salt area. I'm assuming that's because
so that's probably because it's near a water supply, most likely.
So you need to be careful.
So yes, so they wouldn't be using as much salt in those areas.
So again, to repeat, instead of changing your oil and dumping the old oil into the storm drain, make sure you dispose of that oil waste properly.
Yes.
And the fertilizer part, everybody wants a nice lush green lawn, but when that fertilizer gets on the companies that spread the True Greens or companies like that, are they aware of how to, I'm sure they must be, how to spread their stuff so it doesn't?
Yes, and usually their license requires them to abide by certain rules.
Yeah.
So they'll sweep it off of the driveway back onto the lawn, and they should be using appropriate fertilizers that don't have phosphorus and have slow releasing nitrogen.
I think that they leave a note which says that
Yes.
You need to let the stuff sink in or let it dry before you allow your pets to.
Right, and that's more about the toxic nature. But you think about that, if that gets washed into the river, what's it doing to the wildlife there? If you're not supposed to let your pets
There's
walk
a
on it.
nice picture of, I'm sure you have it, of a dog cleaning up its own poop.
If only they would. If only they would.
That's an amazing animal. Well trained.
Very well trained. I wish my dog would do that.
They don't?
He does not, no.
During winter, use salt sparingly. Understanding that the salt is going to end up in a nearby waterway.
Yes.
It'll affect plants and wildlife that live there.
Yes, it will. We've got freshwater animals and plants, and the more salt you put in, the more you're going to disrupt.
Doesn't the salt
them.
Absorb?
The salt will dissolve into the water, but it makes it more salty than fresh.
Okay, what can the average citizen do?
So they can do all of those things. Those are called good housekeeping practices, and so everything we just mentioned, everybody can play a part, and it really does make a difference. The other thing I would urge people to do is support stormwater funding in your budgets. Every town has competing priorities. You've got to decide what you're going to spend money on. And it is a difficult decision, but I've got to tell you, your DPW staff is doing so much work behind the scenes that you might not realize it, but they can't do it without funding. So
What are some of the things they're doing?
Some of the things they're doing is what you mentioned earlier. They're going around and they're cleaning out those catch basins to make sure they don't get too full. They are sweeping the streets to make sure all of that litter, the leaves, the salt, everything gets picked up before it runs off. They are working on projects like the one at the Gibbons School to make sure that we're implementing good stormwater management practices to clean that water before it gets to the nearby water bodies. And in one dramatic case that your viewers might have heard about, next door in Canton, we had what was lovingly referred to as Poopgate, where during the several storms we had back in March, we had a couple of nor'easters there. One neighborhood in particular was really experiencing a lot of flooding that they hadn't before. And when DPW went to investigate, they found 3,600 linear feet of plastic bags with dog poop in it.
No way.
Yes. So someone or someones were picking up their dog poop, but then throwing it into the catch basin.
That sounds like a commercial outfit figuring this is the place to leave it.
Oh my gosh, it was unbelievable. And that project alone cost almost $8,500 for just
to get rid of it.
To get rid of it. I mean, it was completely clogged. It was really disgusting. So, and all of this takes resources and funding, and so
and education.
And education. Your DPW is also trying to make sure that everybody knows all of these good housekeeping methods, and I just can't overstate how important it is to make sure that that these types of departments are funded.
I see the Stoughton street sweeper in the square in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning. They're out there before the place fills up with cars.
Yep.
And that's good. But that to me doesn't really require additional funding, does it? I mean, it's part of the overall project of being a DPW.
Well, and that's correct. And what I'm saying is, in every town, you've got a budget every year, and you've got to prioritize certain things. And generally speaking, I can't speak specifically to Stoughton, but generally speaking, public works isn't always at the top of the list for the budget. So. Just their normal operations. It doesn't even necessarily need to be a special project, but just their normal operations really need to be funded to make sure that they're able to maintain all of those rain gardens, maintain all of those catch basins, and really do what needs to be done to make sure that stormwater is managed properly.
Okay, I don't mean to be repetitive, but I think we should mention some of the things that people should again be aware of. What can we do to further reduce the water pollution?
So we work very closely with our watershed towns to make sure that we can get the word out. And we help the DPWs with mailers like the one that you recently got. We are out in the schools talking to your students to make sure that they understand as they're growing up about stormwater and water conservation. We work with our towns on projects to restore the river. As I said earlier, the Neponset was historically an industrial river, and so lots of little mills put in little dams, which has disrupted the flow of the river. It's created man-made ponds, it's disrupted fish. They can't get over the dam necessarily, and they've fallen into disrepair. So we help towns obtain grants from the state to remove those dams, and it restores the flow, and it's just much better for the environment. As I said before, we also work with towns on projects like the one I described at the Gibbons School, where we joined with the town on a grant application. We advocated on behalf of the town, and we also did a lot of the outreach and education. We did a mailer to everybody in the community so they understood what was going on. They understood what the benefit was going to be for the community, and we do this all across the watershed.
I would think that the benefit to the town of Stoughton and other towns that use well water primarily would be that they really don't have to ever worry about their water supply if we take care of it on the top side.
Yes, and you'll be able to use the river and the other water bodies around for other things as well. A dirty pond or lake is not someplace you want to swim or boat or fish. So keeping the water clean water is a finite resource, so we need to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to keep it clean.
What about dredging?
What about dredging?
Is that something that you folks would get involved with? In other words, years ago they were talking about some of the ponds in Stoughton that were so shallow that you could never drown in them because of the sediment that builds up.
Yep.
I'm sure that a lot of that sediment is some of the pollutants that you're talking about.
It could be, and that presents its own problem, because if you have pollutants that are sort of well settled on the bottom, as soon as you start to dredge, you're stirring it all back up and it gets back into the water, whereas when it's in the sediment it might not actually be in the water affecting the wildlife. So we would approach each project individually to make sure that whatever project was done in an environmentally sound way. Mm-hmm. That's where our advocacy comes in, and that's only part of what we do. So we're always looking to restore the river. We've got some great trout habitat in some of our brooks and streams, and so we're constantly trying to restore flow, to get rid of invasive species that are choking some of the natural plants, and restore the river. We're always looking to build these stormwater structures that better clean the water. Anytime there's a redevelopment project going on, it offers an opportunity to sort of better manage some of that stormwater. We've got, like I said, we've got a lot of built environment in the Northeast, and so it's great to be able to sort of go back, and if you're already going to dig it up, let's see what we can do to better clean the environment.
If you get a case of it stirring up, digging it up, clouds the water, that may be a temporary situation which has a long-term benefit. I mean, the fact that it's deeper gets rid of a lot of the stuff that's down there.
It could be. It all depends on sort of what's in there. Mm-hmm. For example, in the lower Neponset up by Milton and Dorchester, there's a dam that sort of collected sediment. As the river flows, it takes sediment with it, and because of the previous industrial use of the river, there are PCBs in some of the sediment, and so while we might like to remove a dam, for example, we've got to be aware of sort of what's built up against the dam and make sure that we're not going to cause more harm by sort of churning up that sediment. So we always approach it carefully and make sure that we gather all the information possible.
In your brochure that you sent out, you have a section that says "Take care with chemicals."
Yes.
Talking about household chemicals can be toxic to fish and people. Keep them away from paved areas and storm drains. What do you want to do with the leftover medications and chemicals?
So chemicals, we want them appropriately recycled. Sometimes you can bring them back to the store from which you bought them, and they will recycle them. Sometimes towns have hazardous waste days. You bring your unused paints and other chemicals to those days, and they will be properly recycled.
Just don't flush them.
Just don't flush them. Don't put them down the storm drain. And the medications, a lot of police stations are taking medications back, unused medications back. Sometimes pharmacies do the same thing. And again, hazardous waste days.
What are some of the problems that can happen if they flush medicine down the toilet?
That too is going to get into the water supply. So if you flush it down the toilet, that's wastewater, and so that wastewater is going to be treated before it gets discharged into a water body. But still, those chemicals are in the water, and then they can get into the food supply. The fish absorb it. Or eat algae that has it. We just don't want that in the food supply. The fish absorb it.
You catch the fish. You then get the medicine from the fish, and it may be bad
possible.
For you. Never drain chlorinated swimming pools into the street.
Right. We don't want to chlorinate our river.
It's so easy.
You want to make sure that it's dechlorinated before you drain it, and sometimes that's just sort of letting it sit for a time, and the chemicals will dissipate.
The chlorines will dissipate.
Yes.
And the water starts to turn green.
Yes. Right. we just don't want the chlorine getting into the storm
drain. So once it's dechlorinated, can you then let it drain?
I believe so. I don't know the specific Stoughton bylaw, but generally that is permissible.
Interesting. There's so many things you should be aware of. Never apply.
And we don't think about it.
No, well, it's because we never did, which is still no excuse. But it's people like you, your organization, that make us aware of doing the right thing, so we can hopefully keep living a clean life and not worry about.
We got to make sure our water is clean.
And this is fertilizer time. You're thinking of the lawn that's going to go to sleep for the winter. Never apply phosphorus fertilizer without a soil test.
Yes.
It's the law.
It is. So, your Home Depots and Lowe's shouldn't be selling fertilizer to the general public with if it's got phosphorus in it.
Really?
Right. They're supposed to have signs up. There's probably varying levels of compliance with that, but if you do a soil test and your soil clearly needs phosphorus, that's one thing, but most people don't.
How do you conduct a soil test?
I believe you can reach out to the UMass Extension School. They can do it. If you have a landscape service, they can do it. So.
You use a slow release fertilizer.
Yes, you want that nitrogen to sort of seep in slowly. Yeah, the nitrogen is sort of what makes your lawn greener.
Never apply more fertilizers than required.
Right, because it won't soak into the soil. It's just going to run right off.
And you want to keep leaves and grass clippings off the paved areas.
Yes, that is another source of nutrients. So as the leaves break down and deteriorate, they're releasing nutrients as they decompose, and so ultimately it can be similar to releasing fertilizer into the storm drain.
Why don't we put up the contact information for people who might want to call you or send you an email? Yes,
so we have recently started a hotline, and we actually have gotten some calls and emails directly from this mailer that went out last month or 2 months ago. So if you email stormwater@neponset.org, or you can give me a call with any concerns, whether you've seen somebody dumping something down a storm drain, you just have a question about stormwater, perhaps there's some flooding going on and there's a clogged storm drain, please give us a call. We will do our best to make sure the right person knows about it, and we'll get the issue resolved as best as possible. If you have a question, the phone number is 781-575-0354, and that would be extension 300. Yes.
And that's directly
me.
To you.
Yes.
Well, very pleasant to talk to also. And the website is yourcleanwater.org, yourcleanwater.org. I think at this juncture we should take a couple of minutes and show the sponsors of information that we have and that we show every week with our friend Gary LaPierre.
Hi, it's Gary LaPierre, and the crew wants to thank Maxie's Delicatessen. That's at 117 Sharon Street in Stoughton. They're 781-341-1662. American Cancer Society, yes, they're looking for volunteers. Drive cancer patients to and from their treatments. 1-800-ACS-6662. Or just go to www.cancer.org. Ilsa Mark's Food Pantry in St. Anthony's Free Market, 2 Park Avenue in Stoughton. For more information, call Christine Gallagher. That's at 781-341-0611 or 781-341-0549. Meals on Wheels. Just ask for Jessica. You'll find her at 781-344-8882, extension 2. Stoughton Penny Saver. Our business is advertising your business, they tell us. 27 Rose Glen Street, Stoughton, 781-344-4833. Community Forum showtimes in Stoughton. It's Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday at 6 p.m., Monday at 8 p.m., Tuesday at 5 p.m. It's on Comcast Channel 9 and Verizon Channel 28. All comments and suggestions welcome. Contact us at communityforum1@yahoo.com. Samaritans, they're at 41 West Street on the 4th floor in Boston, 02111. Their phone number is 617-536-2460. 24-hour helplines for Samaritans, and the number is 877-870-HOPE. That's 877-870-4673. Samaritans, you can find them at 800-252-TEEN. That's 252-8336. Or find them online at SamaritansHope.org.
We have some of the messages. The Havatorah congregation is having Monday night bingo. They've been on Thursdays for a couple of weeks because of the conflict of holidays. But Monday night bingo starting next week. Doors open at 4:30 p.m. The games start at 6:30 p.m. They got a couple of big coverall prizes that you could win. And I think that for the minimum of $14, you can play the whole night. It's a good take, and you might even see me doing the calling and making people mad because they don't win. Get Fresh is Stoughton's own cooking show. New episodes airing now. I've talked with Sharon Fratkin. She's the host on that show, and she's busily putting shows together that you'll find very interesting. And that's seen on Comcast Channel 9, Verizon Channel 28, on Mondays at 5:30 p.m., Wednesdays at 8 p.m., Thursdays at 9 a.m., and Friday at 5 p.m. And there I am again. We have some conclusions that maybe you want to talk about.
Sure. So I guess if I'm going to leave people with some last thoughts, it's one is when we talk to people about water pollution, often it seems that people think that most water pollution comes from industry. It comes from businesses that
a lot of it did.
Illegally dumping, and it has. Historically, it has. But that's not necessarily the source of, the major source of pollution today. Today, stormwater is really one of the primary sources of pollution in our waterways. And while it might seem overwhelming, there are things that each one of us can do. This is one of those issues where we can really make a difference on an individual basis. Again, I would reiterate, if you see anything that you think is amiss, please give us a call or shoot us an email. Fill out our form on yourcleanwater.org, and we'll do our best to get that information to the right people or answer your questions.
You also have an email address. I don't think we mentioned it. stormwater@neponset.org.
Yes. And lastly, for anybody who wants to learn more about the Neponset, we encourage you to join us as a member, to join us as a volunteer. We are constantly looking for volunteers for events. We actually just did our fall cleanup, where we had several sites from Canton up to Mattapan, and it's unbelievable what we can still get out of the river. So many tires, shopping carts, all kinds of trash. I can't remember how many bags of trash, but all of that takes effort and it takes people. So we'd love to have volunteers. Another thing we do is we monitor the water quality along the Neponset, and we do that through our Citizens Water Monitoring Network, where we have volunteers go out, we train them. They go out once a month from, I think it's May through October, and take a couple of samples of water. We then send those samples off to a lab. We do some of the testing in-house, and we're looking for pollutants. We're looking to see how much fertilizer has gotten in there, how many nutrients are in there, bacteria. We're looking at how clear the water is. And if we find a problem, then we can go back and do what we call hotspot monitoring. And we'll try to find the source of the problem and work with the town or the property owner to resolve that problem. But for that initial testing, we're always looking for volunteers to help us out with that. So, we really want people to be able to enjoy the river. That is our mission. We want to protect the river. We want to make sure it's clean because we want people to use it for boating, for fishing, for all kinds of activities, for, bike trails and walking trails along the river. It's been called the hidden river for a long time,
right.
And it is pretty hidden in spots, but it's also really beautiful. And we want people to know that and to know that it's a resource for them.
It's incredible how these various waterways have been abused over the years, used as a trash bag. Companies up and down the Charles River dumping their industrial pollutants into the river, and then causing that the Charles River itself to be pretty dirty. Or in the Boston Harbor, the same type of thing.
Right.
But it's groups like yours that are making people aware and hopefully bringing all those things under control.
Yeah, and people thought it was impossible to clean up the Boston Harbor and the Charles River and the Neponset, but really we have come so far in a relatively short period of time. So this is doable. This is not an overwhelming problem, and we're looking for partners to help us in that. But it is our mission, and we're passionate about it. We enjoy it. There's so much that can be done by everybody. So
Stoughton was on the short list of communities to host the sludge treatment plant. I don't know if you're aware of that.
I'm not aware of that. No.
We fought hard. We had people like Steve Fradkin come up with some pretty clever stuff that we brought up before town meeting to get everybody in town meeting involved, just to fight them. And all of a sudden, after a long battle, the city of Quincy took it on. Let them site their sludge treatment plant as a temporary facility. I think it's been temporarily there for about 30 years now. But we thank them very much for doing it. It was a more convenient spot than the North Stoughton Industrial Park, because that was going to be our sludge treatment plant. And all the companies that were starting to locate in there, Reeboks, Jordan's Furniture, all the others, they said, we're not going to sit here and be on the short end of these smells.
Right.
We'll leave. And for some reason, all of a sudden, Quincy came to our help.
Yay, Quincy.
Yay, Quincy is correct. We have about 3 minutes left. I think there was a slide that we wanted to bring up to perhaps go through again. Am I correct
Sure,
in that?
I think.
There it is. Talk about that.
Right. So, so this is a cross section of a rain garden, and this just points out how truly, it's an engineering marvel, really. So it's not just any garden that you plant. The soils that are used are specifically engineered to really filter the water as it moves down. So you've got the existing soil, we've got a gravel bed, and then the bioretention soil. And the plants are also specifically chosen because they're hardy, because they can resist drought and they can deal with the occasional flooding that happens. And they're really designed to collect all of the rainwater. You'll see it comes in through the inlet off of what can be really large paved surfaces. Comes in, carrying all of what we just talked about with it, all those chemicals, gas and oil, litter, and really, gets clean, and those plants soak up the nutrients, and it's really a great addition. So specifically at the Gibbons School, it's doing a great job in cleaning the water coming off of the parking lot, and also it's already been used as a teaching tool.
So they start to build those from an existing soil, and then
Right.
they build from there up?
Yes, so you dig out a basin because you want somewhere where the water can collect, but they dig it out and they bring in the special gravel and soil so that it can do the job that it's designed to do.
Mm-hmm.
And it's pretty on top of it.
Well, I'll have to go down and take a look at it. I wasn't aware that it was there.
Please do.
we
We have a
have
couple of other bioretention cells over there too.
Good. Well, you come back again.
I'd love to.
I think that the information you've been able to disseminate has been fantastic.
I'm glad you enjoyed it. I'm glad you learned something from it.
Yes, I did.
So we're trying to get the word out to everybody.
Okay, very good. We've had the pleasure of having Kerry Snyder, attorney Kerry Snyder, and she's the Advocacy Director at the Neponset River Watershed Association, which is located in, what's that, 138?
Yes.
2173 Washington Street, just near the
We're right at Ponkapoag Golf Course.
skating rink there.
Yes, and the skating rink.
Trying
yes.
to get the right word out. With some very valuable information. Hopefully you've learned a lot from. If you have any questions, give her a call. She'll be happy to talk to you. She's very, very pleasant on the phone. In the meantime, I'd like to thank Leo McGowan, our floor director. I especially like to thank Mike Hammond. He's done an awful lot to help prepare this show for your entertainment. Jeff Pickett, Dave Young, C.J. Mullen, and Gina Cole, who is on temporary leave, but she'll be back. My name is Roy Cohen. I hope you enjoyed the show, and we'll look forward to being your host again very shortly. Bye-bye.